And how embarrassing is it to walk into the police department, show them a picture of a rock, and claim injustice?
No, they're like, hey, you still own that rock. I see that rock on your phone. You're good, man.
You're fine.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
How you feeling, man? You got frogs?
Still a little froggy, but better, I hope.
Better's good. Better's good. It's the right direction. So, but bad that there's still frogginess. Any frogginess. It's not good.
Man, the people that missed last week's episode have no clue what we're talking about right now.
That's fine. Go back and listen. I won't even explain it.
Hey, on that front, we got new reviews and new premium subscribers. So thanks so much, guys. That's really awesome. Makes us smile.
Yeah, appreciate it. And please do go rate and review the podcast if you like it. Premium subscribe if you love it. skippydoogles.supercast.com is the premium subscription spot. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Speaking of thank you so much, we got listener mail.
Yeah,
listener
my
mail.
Favorite thing.
You want to hit on the first piece around selling rocks?
Well, I mean, Doogles, I read this, and I've read about this for a long time. There's some special rocks. I gotta pull up the article here, and apparently they're worth $1 million. But like, this is a JPEG of a rock, and it's not even a detailed rock. So sorry, should I just get my rant out of the way?
Yeah,
right
just
here?
do it.
For some reason or another, people sell these things for like $1 million. I don't know why. Again, my solution to NFTs is to take a screenshot on your phone and then show it to your friends and claim you own it. I
think that's a VFT. A very fungible token is when you take the screenshot, but that's fair.
On my phone, it's not funging. There's no funging going on. All right, looks the same every time I look at that picture.
Zero fun. Love it. Yeah,
it's beautiful. I can print it out. I can do it. Anyway, I'm on a tangent now. So this rock is apparently worth $1 million, or that's the market for it. Let's not say worth, because that just doesn't feel right. And some dude was like, "Hey, I could use $1 million." He technically owns this thing on blockchain. He went to post it, and he used the wrong unit of ETH. He meant to post it for 144 ETH, which is about, I think it's like $1.2 million. And he posted it for 444 Wei, if I'm saying that right, WEY, which is the equivalent of about $2. Can you guess how quickly that thing sold, Doogles?
Immediacy. Here's the thing. I summarize this by saying, when you are selling something that is worthless, that is based on something else, that is, when I say worthless, I mean inherently, no inherent value. Yeah. That is based on something that also has no inherent value. That is based on something that also has no inherent value. You really can't be upset when you get the wrong unit. Like, you can't, because you kind of can't get the wrong unit. Like, all units are equally
because it's invalid. All nothing.
Yeah. But ridiculous.
Let's just say the crypto space is still developing. We're going to talk about it more in the show, but I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to laugh at this guy. I'd be heartbroken if I effectively, made a computer mistake that cost me $1 million. But man, is that something.
The sucky thing here, I think, and I might be incorrect in this, but I would think is if it was something that did have inherent value, there could be recourse. Because there's like an obvious error that was made. Like, I believe, like, if you said, let's say someone went on, and I might be wrong again. If someone went on though and sold gold, and let's say gold, I don't know what gold is right now. It's a couple grand an ounce or something, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's say that they sold their gold for $1 an ounce, and they went, "Oh, that was an accident." Like, someone could come in and say that was an obvious accident, because like there's a whole market, right, that exists for gold. Right, gold's $2,000 an ounce. If you sold it for $2 an ounce, you made a mistake. But again, the no inherent value on top of no inherent value on top of no inherent value makes it pretty tough to claim anything. And how embarrassing is it? And how embarrassing is it to walk into the police department, show them a picture of a rock, and claim injustice?
No, they're like, hey, you still own that rock. I see that rock on your phone. You're good, man.
You're fine. Actually, I'm gonna
There's
walk
the
outside,
rock
take a
right
picture
there.
of this rock, and we're all good now. Thank you for the listener mail. Thanks for sending that in. It's alas, alas. All right, I want to reach into the fishbowl and start us off with a convo about money. And what is it? Lynn Alden created a post called "What is Money?" And it's very long. So, which Lynn likes to do. Lynn goes deep. Love it. Very long. So we can put, if you want the full Monty, we'll put it out there so you can take a look. It'll take you a while to get through. But what Lynn does is walks through basically the history of different types of money. And I think it's fascinating because, well, I'm me. You all know that. But I'm gonna just give a few of the highlights from it. And then you can choose whether or not you want to go in deeper.
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I didn't make it all the way through this one, but I love this type of stuff. I've read 5 flavors of this article, mostly related to Bitcoin in the past, 3 years. And it's always fascinating to think about the inherent properties of what people assign value to in order to transact and how that's evolved. It's really good stuff.
Yeah, it's very nice. Highlights. 4 things you can do with money. You can consume it, so buy stuff with it. You can save it, you can invest it, and you can share it. Saving and investing, the differences there are saving is something that is like liquid, not risky. Like you just hold it in cash. Basically, that means you have the money. Investing is when you're taking a risk in order to have it grow at a higher rate. And then sharing is giving it to folks. So 4 things you can do with money. Then there's this, I don't know how else to put this. It's basically what are the properties, what are the attributes of money or potential ones that I think are interesting here. And there are a bunch of them. So I'll try and do this quickly. Money should be divisible, portable, durable, fungible, verifiable, and scarce. In the last one is sometimes also has utility in its own right, but not always. Again, divisible, you can have different units of it. Portable means you can take it places. Durable means like it'll last over time, right? Etc. So all these attributes.
Well, but portable gets forgotten often, and portable is a really key aspect of this. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, but I just don't think everyone always remembers that portability is basically king.
It is. It's a big deal. And I wasn't going to go into any detail on this, but since you brought that up, I will while going through here. Talking about rye stones. We're going to talk about some rye stones in a second. So over time, there have been 4 stages of money. The 4th is the newest that we'll talk about before we get to the rye stones here. According to this piece, the post, the first is commodity money. So that's like things that you have. So like gold, rye stones, which I'll discuss, African beads, livestock. There are a few other examples they give here. And rye stones. I never knew about these rye stones, but I read about the rye stones in this post. I think it's fascinating. So there's this group of individuals. I think the Yaps, or what they were called, and what they created out of limestone. These things they called rye stones. I think they're like kind of sunstones or something like that. But so they would go and grab the limestone and come and create big circles, and the bigger the better, right? And so they would have these pieces of limestone that were 10 feet in diameter and weighed thousands of pounds.
And that was their money? That was
money. Well, that's like the big currency, right? They'd also have small ones, right? And so you talk about portability. No. So they'd go to this island and get the limestone, and people would die on the way back because you're in a wooden boat carrying like thousands of pounds of limestone.
You're like, I'm gonna be rich, or my boat's gonna capsize on the way back. I'm not sure which, but It seems worth it.
And this is a place. This is not where the ledger was created, but this is like an example of where a ledger becomes valuable because of how the lack of portability with these things. They'd be like, okay, so I've got this 2,000-pound limestone. You're buying it from me, or I'm trading it with me, whatever it might be. I'm not taking it to you. Let me just be clear. I'm not taking it to you. But I'm just going to record like Doogles used to own, now Skippy owns. The community agrees with the ledger. And so
and then Doogles, when I decide to put international sanctions on you, I just walk over to 2,000-pound stone and break that thing into pieces and destroy your entire economy. right
Yeah.
there.
So I actually had no intention of going to the Rhinestone here, but now you're taking me deep. But a little bit, that's kind of what happened because they were invaded,
Yeah,
right? And so people like they put the people to labor and whatnot, and they were like, we don't want your Spanish currency. I think it might have been the Spaniards, I can't remember. We don't want your Spanish currency. We have our Rhinestones. And the Spaniards said, oh, do you? And then just basically started like defacing the stones. And so it's a whole thing. So that's the first stage was commodity. Second was gold, the gold standard.
yep,
And the gold standard, so gold is a commodity, but the gold standard is basically the commodity that won out.
sure.
So over time, I said, okay, we need to tie this to something. And so gold and silver were the two potentials. Gold won out for TBD reasons. But anyway, so countries started holding gold in their vaults and they tied their currencies to gold. So that's stage 2. Stage 3, eventually governments were like, okay, you can't redeem money for gold anymore because we want to keep printing money, but if we're on the gold standard, we can't do that. And so things like wars and crises made it difficult for countries to then just hold the gold standard. And so a couple times in the 20th century, once was I think it was FDR was I think the first when we were hitting the Great Depression, and then Nixon finally got the U.S. specifically off of the gold standard. So it's only been 50 years that we've been off the gold standard, and then we went to the next phase, which was fiat currency. So fiat is faith, and so this is just you have paper money. Everyone agrees that it's money, that its units are what they are. There's no standard necessarily backing it, 100% at least. And so there you go. So that's fiat. The last, which we'll talk about, is digital. But before we get to digital, one thing a line I liked in this post about fiat is saying that there's currency, which you can call money. It's a stage of money, but currency actually acts like money most of the time until one day it doesn't. And that they were specifically touching on Russia in this, because if you have something like we mentioned utility earlier, if you have a form of money that in its own right has inherent value, then it's much harder for it to be denied when you take it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But if you have a currency, the currency is actually it's like a social contract that I have with, like Doogles has with Skippy, for example, where you're agreeing this piece of paper that I printed is worth something. And now if I start a war and you go, nope, your paper is actually no longer worth something, it's no longer money. And so that's why they're saying like currency is money until one day it's not. Like that is the thing with fiat currency, is that it's based on fiat. And so like if people lose faith, right? And I just think it was an interesting like line that they put in there. Whereas if you have something that's like gold, it's like, well, it is valid. Like I will always take your gold because I want gold. Right. And so that's something I thought was interesting. I'll pause before making a little bit of a digital transition.
No, I love the point you made with fiat there. It's good, can be good for a track record of hundreds of years, maybe even more. And then one day it's not. And that's where when people get fired up about deficit spending or other poor decisions that, say, just use the US as an example, might make, it's because it's a fairly fragile tie to a true currency if you don't carefully guard that protection. And there's examples from all over the world. Fiat currencies do not stick around that long. There's crises all the time. So
yeah, you got to keep your fiat in check. It's the thing when you have fiat currency.
And your ego, yeah.
If people aren't fiating you at the moment, then
I mean, this is I won't go on this tangent, but Biden came out with his $5.6 trillion budget or something. I'm old enough to remember, Doogles, when budgets used to be like 1 trillion, 2 trillion bucks. Like, we're just gonna spend our way out of, he upped military spending, social spending, everything else, and he'll claim that he pared down his FDR style ambitions. So my mini rant is just like, we seem to think in this country that our fiat's going to be good for ever, regardless of if we recklessly spend for decades on end, which it seems like we're moving towards. It's frustrating.
It's something. It's unprecedented.
That's what it is.
It's
yeah.
like, and so we don't exactly know where we're going, but yeah, maybe we'll even talk about that a little later. We'll see. Well, so last is digital, as I mentioned, and there's private And then there's public digital currencies. I'm going to hit on the public first and then use the private as a transition to some other cryptocurrency related stuff. Public is, we've discussed here, and you may have seen elsewhere, that governments, when I say public here, I mean the government, governments are either testing or creating their own digital currencies. China has been testing it for a few years. There's gums flapping in the US about potentially doing it. We'll see whether or not we end up doing something, but we probably end up needing to. The listed out in this piece were 10 points as to why public has advantages for the government. So this is like from the government's perspective, why public digital currencies have advantages. You can send international payments without the SWIFT system. So SWIFT, we've discussed before, is like a kind of a US dominated system of how different banks around the world talk to each other.
Well, hold on now. It's based in Switzerland. So let's say a West. It's part of Western culture.
Okay. Yes. Well, whatever. I mean, yeah. Low. Anyway, number 2, it can give banking access to the non-banked or underbanked populations in your country. 3, you can track and surveil any transaction.
Yeah,
4,
there's pros and cons to that. All right.
I'm saying from the government's perspective, these are the advantages. Number 4, you can blacklist or block certain transactions that violate your rules. 5, you can add expiration dates or jurisdiction limitations to the currency. I think that one's really actually pretty interesting with that.
Yeah, smart contract stuff, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. 6, you can take away money from citizen wallets for various violations. So that's a bunch of control. 7, you can give money to citizen wallets for stimulus or rewards, right, in a more controlled fashion in theory. 8, you can impose deeply negative interest rates on citizen account balances, which we have touched on.
The Skippy and Doogles show is the only show talking about that in the entire world. So.
Exactly. And we talked to James McIntosh of the Wall Street Journal last year. If folks want to go back and listen to that episode. Number 9, program money can have different rules for different groups.
Yep.
Interesting. And 10 was you reduce the control and fee pressure that commercial banks have over the system. So those are the 10 reasons stated in this post.
Man, that list is the most terrifying list ever. to just have the government be like, oh, Skippy's been saving his whole life to do this on our digital currency, and we don't like him anymore. Like, we think that we have video of him running a red light. We're stealing all his money. He's now homeless. Like, that just does not seem okay. And there's other slippery slope points on that 10 point list too.
Yeah.
I guess I hadn't heard it broken down that way, but I have a lot of stomach pain around that list.
It gives you some heartburn looking through that list, which is why it's from the government perspective. Like, those are the advantages. Private is almost the opposite, I'll say. Now, I read this piece in the New York Times called "The Latecomer's Guide to Crypto," and it's meant to be a crypto explainer written by Kevin Roos. I think it's worth reading. I want to give an even later comer's guide, real quick, because even I read through this and said the questions that I generally get about blockchain, crypto, NFTs, people are at an even more fundamental level than what because it's like complicated and actually conceptually confusing, the whole thing. And so I want to give what I hopefully close to like a 45-second low fidelity description of what crypto is. And you know more about crypto.
Yeah, I can't wait to see if you can nail this. Yeah.
Low fidelity. So first, in order to understand crypto, we should understand a ledger. We discussed a ledger earlier. Yeah. So if you take something like a Venmo, right, or even a bank, but let's just say Venmo. Venmo keeps tabs on transactions. So what I'm sending to you, what you're sending to this other friend, that's just a ledger, so that you can know what account balances are and who's sending to who. That's a ledger anywhere. If you have someone like a Venmo that is keeping track of that ledger, they own the ledger. They have all the data. They can do what they want with it, right? Now I introduce blockchain. Blockchain is a ledger that is no longer centralized, meaning not one entity or person owns it. So it's a decentralized ledger. So multiple computers around the world will hold this ledger, right? And it is encrypted in such a way that in theory has higher levels of security and the lack of ownership. That is blockchain. Blockchain came about, as far as I know, from a white paper created by Satoshi, who is not in Florida. FYI, I'm just going to throw that out there.
That's up for debate.
Yeah, that's up for debate. Anyway, but this guy Satoshi created this white paper about 13 years ago. Blockchain was created. Crypto are currencies that use the blockchain to allow for decentralized payments from one individual to another, which means there is a ledger that is decentralized
and public.
That's very important.
Public's important.
Public, which is one of the reasons why I used Venmo as an example, because you can make your transactions on Venmo private, but let's just say like the default,
most people,
public.
Yeah.
So if you go on to Venmo, if anyone's used that, you take a look at your Venmo and you can see like Josh paid Sally $12, right? If you think about a public blockchain, it'll say 92659 owns this or paid this to 12934. And so when people are stealing a whole bunch of money, because they say like crypto is great for crime, when they steal a whole bunch of money, as we've discussed before, what you know is this account sent to that account, but you don't know the owner. And so it's not necessarily great for crime because we know that that account has the money. So now what people have to do, the law enforcement
figure out who owns that account.
And then you know. So that is my baseline description of crypto. You understand the ledger, then you can understand blockchain, and then crypto is just money traded on it. Again, low fidelity, lots of nuance, but I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, so there's so much there, but I think you did a really nice job. So I don't know that we say this enough with, we are here to talk about investing because we find it interesting. We are very much like James McIntosh that this is something that's endlessly challenging and interesting, and that's why we talk about it, right? But I don't know that we give enough caveats about how difficult this is, how many known unknowns there might be in the space, and in the crypto world there's even more. So Doogles, I'm looking at a Bloomberg article on my screen because there was another big crypto hack this week that lists 10 different large crypto hacks that have happened within the past 7 years, ranging between $130 million stolen and $611 million stolen. On top of that, I'll tell a personal story about how much the crypto world is the wild, wild west. I explored a crypto index fund a while back, and I was trying to build it. The listeners may remember this. And then I found a shop out of South Africa, and I had a few bucks in there. This week, at the end of Q1 2020, they decided to take their crypto exchange off the Ethereum platform and move it to Polygon. And they informed people on that via 2 posts over the last 2 weeks on social networks. I didn't catch those. I went in to look at my wallet, and the balance for that fund was $0 because they just pulled the rug out of what was going on with Ethereum, even though this is a legit shop. So I'm working with their compliance, and I'll get my money back. I mean, no big deal. But stuff like that happens in the crypto space in a way where if Fidelity or E-Trade or Vanguard is your asset manager, it ties to this whole conversation, right? This decentralized versus centralized piece. When you have a central authority in place and you sell your rock that's worth $1 million for $2, someone usually steps in and says, you know what? We control this ledger. We're going to adjust that. We're going to, pull that back and start fresh. The more I've played around with the decentralized space, I think there might be more cons than pros because you see these things happen, whether it's with $600 million hacks or someone mistyping something on a keyboard and costing themselves $1 million. And it's really hard, if not impossible, to pull the ledger back, to correct the ledger, right?
Centralized has its cons in that someone owns it and you have to trust that. It has its pros in that someone owns it. and
that's actually a really big pro. Now, if you're Putin and you're going, someone owns the world financial system that's not me, man, do I wish this was decentralized. Sure, you have a point. But also when it's decentralized and someone smarter than you feels out how to steal half your government reserves and you don't have a way to I mean, that wouldn't happen in the government currency that you talked about because they would maintain ownership. But if Iran and Russia and some other players decided they wanted to do everything on the Bitcoin network, I think there would probably be a transaction or two that went against their wishes, and they'd have a really hard time reversing those things.
Yeah, it's kind of, you brought up with regard to crypto a number of times examples of people that are in places where their currency is no bueno, I'll call it, for the time being, and how having something that is decentralized can be really helpful there. We talked about Afghanistan, we've talked about South American countries, right? Now with Russia, Ukraine. So it's kind of like centralized is great as the predominant, maybe in a number of ways, but having alternatives is also really healthy. What's hard to imagine is the decentralized as the dominant, at least in today's world. Look, it's nascent, we're early. And so what the future looks like TBD. But when you have hotshot Bukele building volcano-based like mini-me, installations of Bitcoin, like that's nascent stuff that we can't quite bet the farm on yet. So, and on the, I'm going to just reach into the fishbowl you just reached into for a sec here though.
Yeah.
Because looking at the $600+ million hack that you were talking about happened recently. It was in this game called Axie Infinity. Mm-hmm. I only want to highlight this because so the hack does not make me chuckle, but what Axie Infinity did make me chuckle. Axie Infinity is a game where players breed and battle with digital pets.
Yep.
These digital pets are axolotls.
Yep.
Which is where Axie comes from. Right now. No, actually not right now. Go finish the episode. Okay. But then right after you finish the episode, if you don't know what an axolotl is, Google it. AXOLOTL. Google it. You're either going to be like, oh, so cute, or you will be frightened. Because those are the only two feelings you can have about an axolotl. It is like a rare-ish animal that is banned to have in many states, but in possibly countries as well. But go Google it, because I just I'm picturing people battling or breeding with these things, and I just go, okay. But anyway, so there's this game. It was the blockchain.
Axis Infinity, the game, is a superstar of the crypto community because a lot of the gameplay was like tied to blockchain, and then the pets have real value. So it's, when people talk Web3, sometimes that's one of the examples they throw out. But after the hack, maybe that gets pulled back a little bit. Again, guys, it's all risky stuff. The crypto stuff is a whole level of, it's even riskier than the average equity investments we're talking about here. So it's interesting, no doubt. The technology is fascinating, no doubt. But don't think it's like a free lunch out there.
No free lunch. Speaking of free lunches, what's in your fishbowl?
Man, can we just talk about can we just continue to talk about people making poor investment decisions? So, do you know the most popular stocks that get traded today, Doogles?
Oh, you're gonna give me heartburn.
ProShares Ultra QQQ, which is a 3 times levered QQQ. Then S&P 500 SPY, which is good.
Okay. Yep.
Then ProShares Ultra VIX short-term futures ETF. Like, just if you hear some kind of volatility with futures of the same name, just like run away and hide. Then ProShares Ultra Short QQQ, which, if I remember correctly, is a leveraged short of the QQQ. And then QQQ, the non-levered version. Like, actively traded in 2020 in terms of millions of contracts, the ProShares Ultra QQQ has like 120 million contracts out this year.
Okay, as I woosah myself, a couple definitions, because this gives me so much heartburn.
Yeah, sorry, I just dove into like the meat. I didn't.
Which is great. So QQQ is an ETF which an ETF is basically like a mutual fund, kind of, with tax advantages. So an ETF that is based on the 100 largest companies by market cap in the NASDAQ. So basically it's very tech heavy.
Yep, which is riskier. If you're familiar with beta, they're going to be higher beta stocks, which means they will have bigger upswings and bigger downswings than the S&P 500.
Yes. So you have that ETF. And then when Skippy was talking about leveraged ETFs, that means you're taking QQQ and multiplying it by 2 or 3. Except
With
not
debt.
quite. Except not quite.
Yeah,
Which I'll get to in a sec. He also mentioned inverse ETFs, which is basically taking the opposite trade. And you can do that leverage too.
Yeah, and typically shorting other contracts, all complicated stuff that these should be among the least traded ETFs in the space rather than near the most traded.
Yeah, it's okay. So I have 2 material issues here. One is, so there's this Wall Street Journal article. This is coming from riskiest bets in the stock market are the most popular. In this piece, it starts off with the following. I'm going to read a couple paragraphs. I think the paragraphs are split here, but when technology stocks tumbled for a fourth straight day, that's not that long period of time. Anyway, in January, it is 4 days. It is by definition.
Days.
Evan Feder, a 25-year-old in the U.S. military, saw an opportunity to swing for the fences. He poured $15,000 into the ProShares Ultra QQQ, an exchange-traded product that is designed to triple the daily return of the NASDAQ 100, bidding for what he called a once-in-a-lifetime gain. Okay. There's 36 issues just in those 2 sentences I just read. But issue number 1 for me, big issue number 1 is just on the last 4 words. Once in 5?
No.
Once in a lifetime gain. Lifetime gain.
Listen, I know that you hope your life expectancy is 80 to 100 years. Maybe this guy thinks his life is only going to last 5 days, Doogles. And then this is exactly a once in a lifetime, which doesn't really make sense because I guess he's 25 years old. But that's basically the only logic here, right? If your lifetime is 5 to 10 days, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
So let's bring some stats into this right quick. Okay. All right. These will not be exact because I went back and just looked at charts and stuff, but once in a lifetime. So just another definition. Once in a lifetime means one time in a lifetime. So let's give that definition
on the Skippy and Doogles show anyway.
At least here that's what it means here. So QQQ, the drawdown being the last high to the low, about 20% is where it was. There's been a rebound recently, but QQQ. So this once in a lifetime opportunity they're talking about was about 20% down from its high, QQQ. Okay. Once in a lifetime. Back in 2020, 2 years ago, it was down 27% from its high. Okay. 2018, two years before that, it was down about 22% from its high that year. Between July of 2015 and February 2016, there were 3 different points where it was down 15% or more. So there's a 4-year respite then. So I'll give you the 4 years. So 4 days we're talking about here, 4-year respite. Then you go back to 2011. There was a 16% drop. But even during those 4 years, there were multiple 10% plus. So corrections, multiple 10% plus drops. Same thing happened, another 16% drop in 2010. So the year before. Between October 2007 and March 2009, there was a 53% drop in the QQQ. And I'm not even going to go past that, except to say, as you've mentioned multiple times, that NASDAQ was down 80% during the
82%, baby, in the early 2000s. Yeah.
So this is once in a lifetime. If someone has been alive for less than 2 years, it's once in a lifetime. If you've been alive for even 15 years, you've seen 9 or 10 of these.
Yeah, but you didn't have a Robinhood account 15 years ago, so you didn't even know what QQQ is. You probably still don't know what QQQ is, but you saw some commercials on March Madness, which claims that you can invest in someone dunking on someone else's head in a fun way. So, come on, Doogles.
Now imagine we've talked about Warren Buffett, a good friend. Yes, we've talked about Buffett a few times, and Munger. Right, their lifetime, you can as you've mentioned, Warren Buffett has some kind of like unprecedented ability to delay gratification is
Yep.
one. And two, has a long lifetime in his 90s.
Yeah.
And so the patience on that individual, sometimes maybe he just falls asleep. Let's be honest, because he's old and just doesn't see these things. But the patience is like quite incredible, because you know that this stuff happens like nearly all the time. And
Yeah.
so once in a lifetime opportunity means something very, very different. That's my first issue. Once in a lifetime. Should I go into my second issue?
That was a good 5 minutes on like 5 words. Yeah, we
Isn't it a
better
minute
get
a
to
word?
the second issue.
Yeah, sorry. My second issue, I'll try and make this shorter. My second issue is on the leverage part of this. So these leverage ETFs are meant to be held for a day. And so they use derivatives and all sorts of other nonsense.
Well, let's say they're daily contracts in most cases rather than. So this is frustrating and super confusing. It sounds like if QQQ goes down by 3% and you're 3 times levered to the inverse, again, guys, we don't recommend any of this on the show. It sounds like you should get a 9% positive return. That's not actually what happens in actuality, assuming that 3% drawdown with the QQQ happens over multiple days because of the way these contracts are structured. And they have to do that, as I understand it, so the fund doesn't go bankrupt with basically the way they pick their leverage. It's really complex.
Yeah. You have the general, I'm going to call it coin flip, not because it's 50-50, but just from like luck of the draw.
Yeah.
You have a general coin flip as to whether the bet you're making is even in the right direction. Then you have a compounded coin flip as to whether the leverage ETF you bought is going to do what it's even supposed to do because of the daily contract nature of it. It's like you're not even sure what you're buying. Like ultimately, in the end, if you're holding this for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
I'm just think, research, think. If you are 25 years old, good news is you've got your life ahead of you. Time is on your side. You can make your mistakes now. Bad news is you should probably be in things that you're going to hold for a long period of time such that you can take advantage of compounding. That's all.
Well, you said he has his life ahead of him. I mean, just imagine how excited he's going to be next week when he gets a brand 5 new days to follow the steps. It's another lifetime.
Yeah.
All right.
That is good news. Yeah. Every week you get 5 more days. Oh, my goodness. What else you got in the fishbowl?
I won't talk about it in detail, but I like that there was a piece on Alpha Architect that trashed on the efficient market hypothesis this week. That's pretty good. It's called Are Stock Market Bubbles Identifiable? And then, yeah, let's talk about the bond market.
Well, do you want to talk about your first thing or the Alpha Architect?
No, I just wanted to mention it so people can do a deep dive. All right, headline, Doogles. Bond market suffers worst quarter in decades. We told you this was coming.
Yes. Yeah. The wild thing with this is when interest rates go up, bond prices go down. When interest rates go down, bond prices go up. It's understandable that when interest rates are being raised, that you start to have bad bond performance. But you don't have hope today of interest rates going down to increase the prices of bonds. So what do you do with this information? Like it's a different time period than we had 40 years ago. What, in your view, what do you do with this information? Buy the dip?
Oh, no. I've diversified out of bonds, which is pretty much the first time in my investing life that I've diversified out of bonds. So this is a very fascinating thing. The 60-40 portfolio, if you're not familiar, is the common guidance for your know-nothing investor. And what it means is 60% equities and 40% bonds. Historically, during the backtest, that has really incredible performance. But most of those backtests involve a period from 1980 to basically 2020, where bond prices went from, I think it's like 18% to effectively zero. And because of the inverse correlation you just talked about, that means bonds performance are like historically great. When you do the flip side of that and go from basically 0 up to 18, assuming that happens over the next 40 years, the bond price performance would be very, very poor. Doogles, I have a quick aside here. I'm reading a new book called The Bond King about Bill Gross and PIMCO.
Oh, yeah. Let me know what you think when you're done.
I'm halfway through, pretty solid. Have you read it?
I haven't, but I was thinking about it.
PIMCO at one point became so tied to U.S. government policy that they got a lot of risk-free trades. And the bailouts that happened with Freddie and Fannie, at that point, Bill Gross is loading up on their debt and saying these are effectively, they were priced as if the quasi-government organizations could go bankrupt, but they were effectively guaranteed by the full faith of the government. So he loaded up on that debt. It brought back this wave of memories for me because I was actually buying the Freddie equity at that point with the same hypothesis of like, the government's not going to let this go under. The government has come in after 2008 and said, we're backing this. But the fascinating part about that book, I'll tell you, is how frequently he got risk-free trades in a way that probably wasn't fair by collaborating with the government. And during some of the TARP stuff in 2009, 2010 too, the government tapped PIMCO as a strategic buyer of bonds. So they got another free lunch. It's a fascinating read. It doesn't necessarily end well. So maybe we'll talk about that in detail next week.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now with your even halfway through recommendation, I'm certainly going to pick this thing up.
Yeah, but as that ties to this, and the reason I mentioned Bill Gross is when Bill Gross is the bond king and has this incredible reputation, even he realized that he had been picking bonds from the mid 70s to, basically today, and he knew the headwind that was behind him. So his performance would not have been anywhere close if bond rates were going up and therefore prices were falling. So if we tie back to the article, bond performance this quarter with the Bloomberg US aggregate index was about -6%. That is pretty rare in the grand scheme of things. The last time we had worse performance, was 1980.
Yep. Yeah. It's wild. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but to be clear, the bond yield, bond price, so that's a true inverse correlation. But if you're holding a bond to maturity, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. You end up getting the full amount, right? But if you're buying into like bond ETFs, whatnot, which most people are going to be, and you're likely not, you're going to buy it at some point, sell it at some point, then you're gonna end up getting hit by some of this, I believe.
Well, yeah. So this ties back, and if people are interested, the Bond King book is a great place to do this. Let's see if I can do it justice. But if you need $100, right, Doogles, and you come to me and you issue a bond for $100 that matures in a year, say, I'm going to give you that $100, and you're going to pay me interest effectively. We'll just say you pay me $1 a month. So for the next 12 months, you're going to pay me $1, and then 12 months from today, you're going to pay me my $100 back. So I get a total of $112. The thing that happens is as interest rates change, that bond term is fixed. But as interest rates change in the world around us, people might look at that stream of payments and go, oh, that either got more valuable to me or less valuable to me. And that's where the price on the secondary market, which effectively Bill Gross created, he created that whole secondary market. He created that whole idea of trading the bonds. That's what's going to swing up or down. And that's where if you hold a mutual fund or ETF that ties to bonds, you're going to see price movement there. But the revenue stream remains fixed.
Yeah. Yep. I think that was a very good explanation. Well played.
I get lucky every now and then. All right. What's in your fishbowl?
Yeah. After like decades of being this stuff is complicated though. Like that's the whole thing. I have one more thing in the fishbowl, and it's your favorite topic, which is why I want to bring it up. The billionaire tax is back, baby. The billionaire tax is back. The highlights I'll throw out, and then I want to get your rant or general reaction. And we've talked about the billionaire tax or wealth tax here a few times in the past. It's been brought up a good amount. This newest proposal would have people that are worth $100 million or more pay a minimum of 20% on their capital gains each year, whether they sold the thing or not. So in today's world, if you sell something, you have realized gains, you have to pay tax on it. This is saying unrealized and realized capital gains you have to pay. It's going to require that people track and report their overall wealth, right? Which is complicated. It's going to require that the IRS tracks that, which is complicated. And I don't know how exactly this would work, but what I was reading is that you wouldn't necessarily, especially for illiquid things, you wouldn't necessarily have to pay the full tax in that year. You could split it up over multiple years, which sounds like all of this sounds like a complete administrative headache. Ignore the financial side of it. But the billionaire tax is back and sounds different than the wealth tax that was proposed about a year ago, from what I read. I shall pause.
I mean, at this point, I need to just write down whatever episode it was where I already ranted about this and refer people to this. The logistics are just impossible, man. And I understand the idea. I think there's such better approaches. If you just want to say that, like, the tax rate in this country is 20% and you don't need an accountant to file, you could simplify a lot of these things and you could make it so the loopholes that the wealthiest Americans take advantage of get removed. There's in one of the articles I read on this, it said, you know, the average person that's worth more than 100 million pays a tax rate of, I don't know, 5 or 8%, you know, some seemingly too low number, because their tax bracket is actually in the 30s probably. It might even be higher than that. What's the top tax bracket these days? Is it 39.6?
Yeah, it's something like that, plus the like Medicare.
True.
Surtax
And then your state could. So yeah, it could easily be in the 40s, especially if you're in like a California or New York. But that's not typically what they pay because of all the loopholes. So fix it that way. Anyway, the thing that always gets me fired up is this tax on wealth that isn't necessarily liquid wealth. Like, I own this company and I am reinvesting the profits of that company to grow that company. And all of a sudden you're going to say, oh, you know what? Give me 20 million bucks. And you're like, well, I don't really have 20 million bucks. I'm trying to hire 7,000 more employees and build 2 factories. You know, like, it just doesn't work. In my opinion.
That's the like the Milton Friedman like stance. I think similar to that. I'm not saying that you take the pure Milton Friedman stance, but he was pretty anti-government from at least anti-large government. I shouldn't say anti-government, anti-large government. And specifically here had the take where like, why don't we just make a flat tax and then get rid of all the discounts and the deductions and like all that, and just say like, you're going to pay 20%. Now there's reasons, there's pros and cons, right, to that kind of thing. But that's what it just reminded me of. Yeah. In my mind, the thought of, there are very, very, very large pools of money, organizations that have larger pools of money than our government that exist out there, right, in this country. And the government's hurting. How do we get it? Like, I think, like, I understand that train of thought, but the consequences of implementing something like this are actually really hard to even understand, because there are these compound effects. Last week, we were talking about unwinding of stuff. When you start to unwind illiquid businesses, what are the ramifications on prices and employment and belief in future investment, right? Because now you're taking, if, as many people will say, and I hold some belief in this, if not complete, that like private property is one of the things, and the protection of that intellectual private property and private property is like one of the things that fuels entrepreneurship, right, in the country. Because if I build this and grow it, I own it. If you start to say, if I build it and grow it to a certain point, I own it. When it gets beyond that certain point, and granted, $100 million is large, but when it gets past that certain point, I kind of don't. Now you're going to start to see a lot of $99 million wealth.
Oh, yeah.
And who knows where the rest of it is? It's going to be sitting in Axiatal coins, you know, or something.
They're getting ripped off.
Yeah, exactly. Right. People figure, you have the system, people figure out the system. And maybe it's just better to say, like, look, what we know, and this is a terrible idea, but what we know is right now we have 20,000 households that have over $100 million, and we need money. Can each of you just right now just like write a check so we can get this amount of money, and then like go about your business in the future? Again, terrible idea. But anyway, yeah, anyway, the billionaire tax is back, and it seemed like this week it both came back and was not quite killed, but like effectively already, because every time it comes back, people go, no one's going to pass this. Like, there's not a world in which this ends up passing.
So it sounds like you're talking about 20 million bucks for these folks, and I know there's only a few folks in the country that are worth more than 100 million, but like, think of all the other places you'd rather live if you saved 20 million bucks a year. I mean, there's lots of nice places in this world that aren't like, you're just encouraging these people to leave. It doesn't really work.
An interesting way to put it.
All right. Anything else, Doogles?
I'm wrapped.
That's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Hit us on Twitter at Skippy Doogles. SkippyDoogles.com has all sorts of good info. We love the listener mail. We love our listeners across the world. And we're so appreciative of the premium subscribers and reviews that you guys have sent recently. So thanks so much. We'll be in touch. Peace.
Thank you.